A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sing with me?
Welcome to another exciting episode of Debating Metal. I'm your host, Kenneth Dean, the Dean of Metal, along with my co-host, Chris K. You may be wondering about that strange intro you just heard. Well, on this episode, we are beginning a long series called The ABCs of Metal. So, Chris, go ahead and give them the details.
All right, so a few weeks ago, I had an idea where I thought about, and I'm sure other people have done something similar before, but basically, what are the best bands of every letter of the alphabet? A, B, C, D, blah blah blah. Each letter, what band defines that letter? And so we're gonna pick today. We're doing 16 bands in a bracket format, and we're gonna kind of pin them head to head and go through all their accolades and influence and what really makes them define that letter. And we're gonna have to do this a few different ways as we go A to Z. Some letters have far more bands than others, and we picked 16 that we think are fitting of this today. And we're just going to go head to head, one by one, and go through and pick who we define as the band that represents the letter A.
All right, well, sit back, relax, turn it up to 11, and let the debate begin. But as always, I have a little bit of housekeeping to do before we begin. So, as you can tell by what you're listening to, my voice is not at its top echelon as always. So please excuse my voice tonight. I am recovering from a pretty bad cold that I had. It was more like the flu, but it was pretty rough on my voice. A lot of coughing. And number two, last week we mentioned that we would be starting Rusty Metal and Freshly Forged again, but we're going to hold back on that for a couple of episodes while we work on these ABCs of metal. All right, so Chris, we got this bracket. We've got 16 bands going head to head with each other, and there can only be one winner. So that is this is going to be quite the episode.
Yeah, we've kind of picked them from every genre of metal, so nothing will be left out. We went through and pretty thoroughly picked like the most famous bands according to multi countries. Like I went through multiple lists and compiled this, and hopefully it covers everything. I'm sure some people are going to go, well, why isn't this band on here? And I mean, I'd be shocked if you did say that in some of these categories. Tonight we're doing 16. I think is going to be the biggest one with I think it was 400 bands, something like that. No, but yeah, no, it's quite a bit. So like I said, we're going to start with the bracket format on this one, and any of the ones that have a tremendous amount of bands. That's how we're going to handle it. But we've got some surprises in store for these ABCs. So, do you want to go over the full list, or do you just want to do it one by one and kind of excite the listeners with each bracket?
I think we're going to let the listeners wait as we go bracket to bracket. We've got 8 brackets, or eight head to heads, and then it's going to go down to 4, and then it's going to go down to 2, and so forth, and then there's just one winner. So we'll introduce each band as they come along because I think that's more fun that way.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, I'm going to introduce each one, and then uh, uh, Kenneth is going to run over some statistics, and then we're going to discuss why we think this band deserves it over the other. So, our first bracket, or first head to head, is going to be AC/DC versus Anvil.
Well, that's a lot to go head to head on. I mean, you got two bands that have been around for quite a while. So AC/DC formed in 1973. They have 16 studio. Now, the information I'm going to give is based on their discography as Wikipedia has it. But in AC/DC's case, we're going on the American releases only. So
Okay.
16 studio albums for AC/DC, one EP, three live albums, two soundtracks, and two box sets. Okay. And Anvil weighs in coming in from 1978. They have 20 studio albums, one live album, and four compilations. Now, if you may have noticed, I did not say compilations for AC/DC, and that's because other than the soundtracks, which I think the last Iron Man soundtrack, that was it Iron Man 2?
Iron Man 2. Yeah.
Iron Man 2, that's the only compilation album that they have. Who
Who
made
made
Well, Who
who
Made Who? Yes,
kind of counts. Yeah.
kind of counts. It was sort of, but it didn't have really their greatest hits. I mean, it had You Shook Me All Night Long, I think Hell's Bells. But as far as greatest hits was concerned, Iron Man 2 had a better layout and more songs.
Agreed.
But Who Made Who was kind of like a small compilation.
Yeah.
But it was mainly about those two new songs at the time. So that's where we're putting them against Anvil um, and AC/DC.
All right, so straight off the bat, AC/DC is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, whether you value that or not, I tend to think, like, very realistically, I would say it does hold some weight. Um, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to me is a bit of a joke. However, it is a major organization that promotes music, and therefore it still carries some amount of weight. And hopefully, as we see more metal bands make their way in there, it brings some attention to the metal bands we love. I still won't respect it as an organization, but what do you think about that?
Um, Quite honestly, for this discussion, I mean, yeah, for the head to head, it pulls some weight, but overall, it really doesn't because most of the bands that we're going to talk about, and I would say probably a high 90 to 95%, maybe even higher, are not going to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
That's true.
Um, it's not something that um the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just looks at. They just disrespect metal
100%.
constantly. You know, this year they just basically nominated Iron Maiden again, third time, and Iron Maiden should be, to me, a band should stay on the nominations list as long as they're not, like as long as they haven't been brought in. I mean, maybe for 10 years, or, once they're nominated once for the first time, they should stay on until, you know, for one reason or another, they come off or they get inducted. But it's ridiculous that it's only the third time, um, with all the accolades that band has achieved over the years.
Yeah.
No reason. Anyhow, that's Iron Maiden. Um, But just a real quick thing, In Excess was also nominated this year for the first time. Now, if I'm not mistaken, In Excess has been around for a long, long time, and they have been eligible for a long, long time. And that is just a disgrace because the music that they came out with in the 80s and into the 90s was absolutely outstanding stuff, and they definitely deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I'm pretty sure they're going to get in on this shot, but to be the first time that they're nominated is a disgrace.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I don't respect the organization, but yeah.
So anyhow, so yeah, I for this discussion, it doesn't really hold as much weight for me.
Okay. I think, I mean, I'll say, in my opinion, it does just for the sake of it has global eyes on it, right? So, um, agree to disagree. I mean, I'm not saying it really matters because fuck them, but yeah. All right. So, what's something you have on your list of?
All right, so we're talking about ACDC and we're talking about Anvil. So let's talk about what Anvil brings to the table. Okay. If you see a lot of early, not documentaries, but there was some things that they talked about Anvil. Actually, when the movie came out, not there was a lot of clips that were being promoted, and people like Slash mentioned the fact that Anvil was just like one of the best bands at the time. Now, I'm going to say this, growing up in that time period, I heard about Anvil, but for the life of me, I didn't listen to him. But maybe once I heard metal on metal, and that was it. They weren't really popular. And I grew up in New York, where a lot of that music is going to be pretty popular, and I did not hear about them that much. Considering there was, I've heard about Metallica, being, when they came to Yonkers. I knew Twisted Sister came to Yonkers, when I was a teenager.
Mm,
But to, and somebody, and all these bands, Kiss and all the New York style bands. And I know Anvil's from Canada, but damn, I didn't hear jack about Anvil. So that tells you a little bit about their hard up story. And the biggest thing for Anvil is that movie. This is Anvil. That movie was outstanding. Um, it was well done. It was sad. It was happy. It made you angry. It made you cry, but it made you laugh. And so it was one of those kinds of movies. You're like, wow, these guys are still around, going through drummers like Spinal Tap did, and it's it's just amazing. And that literally was the real life Spinal Tap for drummers in Anvil. And you know that's their story.
yeah. I mean, I didn't hear about Anvil until the documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's called Anvil: The Story of Anvil, and it's pretty entertaining. You're right. There are some similarities to Spinal Tap, and I mean, that's amusing in and of itself. But at the same time, um, a lot of, like you said, a lot of these bands cite them as inspiration. I mean, I think every band in the Big Four is in that documentary. There's several others, but just you go through 20 albums, and I would say most of them sound the same. AC/DC, I think, you could argue the same thing. I mean, a lot of them sound the same, but I mean, obviously they went through some different phases in that band. They're more bluesy, more rock at certain times. They have two different major singers. Um, and I just think there's a little bit more variety, especially when you compare like the Bond years to the Brian years. And they had two singers and were massively successful with both. More so technically with the second singer, Brian. So, um, I feel like there's just more to talk about with ACDC too. They're not strictly metal, they're more hard rock, but I think, AC/DC is also like a gateway into metal too for a lot of people. Anybody who's seen the Iron Man movie, or the second one specifically, but both the first one and the second one, there's AC/DC songs in there, and there's just heavy stuff too. Um, so it's in that regard, I just think there's just more interesting.
Oh, I don't disagree in this particular case because you know there's a lot of albums from Anvil that they were given plenty of opportunities. I mean, when
Mhm.
you're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 albums before the movie came out. 13 albums between 1981 and 2007. That's a
Mm.
long time.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, you're talking that's over 20 years. And yes, they were known and yes, they were kind of influential. But their story was unknown to the masses until the movie came out. And I mean, the albums that they've released since the movie are not bad. Juggernaut of Justice is a pretty good album, and the sound is awesome. Hope in Hell after that is pretty cool. Pounding the Pavement, Anvils. I mean, they got several albums over the years since the movie came out, and they continue to put music out. The thing is, it's not necessarily music that's going to be out there for everybody. I mean, they're one of the lower echelon bands. In this particular case, on the head to head, definitely AC/DC is going to hold that edge. I mean, it's AC/DC. Look who we're talking about here. You know, very few
Yeah,
people do not like AC/DC, except for my wife. She doesn't
your
like it.
wife, yeah, she
Yeah,
doesn't.
it's terrible.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm gonna pick AC/DC for this one myself. Anvil has their merits, like you said, they have some really good songs, and they are metal. I mean, they're certainly 100% metal. I think that AC/DC has just had more of an impact by far.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that means AC/DC is advancing, and they will take on whoever wins between Aerosmith and Angel Witch.
Ooh. All right. Aerosmith and Angel Witch. Okay, so Aerosmith formed in 1970. Um, and they have released since that time 15 studio albums, 3 EPs, 9 live albums, 15 compilations, and 72 singles. Shit, that's a lot of singles.
Yeah.
All right. Now, conversely, Angel Witch, formed in 1976. They were one of the leading pioneers of the new wave of British heavy metal. They released 5 studio albums, 2 EPs, 4 live albums, and 4 compilations. So, um, what do you got?
Um, I mean, I guess the biggest thing that's a knock against Aerosmith in this scenario is that they're not really a metal band. They have accolades after accolades after accolades, and they're definitely influential. Um, but I don't. It's hard for me to consider them like really a metal band.
Well, I kind of hear what you're saying, and I kind of agree. But at the same time, when you think about what, like for instance, yes, Black Sabbath in the 70s was much heavier than Aerosmith,
Mhm.
right? But when you look at, let's say, Aerosmith compared to Kiss, Kiss heavier, you know, uh, Love Gun, Rock and Roll Over, Destroyer, much heavier than stuff that Aerosmith did. However, they were both, top of their game in that mid 70s. They
Yeah,
were both, but at the time when Aerosmith made their name, heavy metal really wasn't heavy metal. I mean, the heaviest bands out there were Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Deep Purple, and then
it's true.
Aerosmith and Kiss. Okay. And Rush was still kind of developing their sound and stuff like that. So that was, hard rock of the 70s was, if you were heavy, it was that's eventually what became and considered heavy metal. I'm not trying to convince anybody that Aerosmith is metal, but when they reformed for what it's worth, when they recreated themselves, they were part of that uh hair metal 80s metal scene. They
That's
were
true.
right in the thick of it. Okay. Their music was, compared to Poison, compared to Motley Crue, compared to Cinderella, all those styles of bands, Aerosmith was right there, hard rock songs and ballads.
No, you're 100% right there, and I mean, even their association with, like, say, Wayne's World, um, I think gives some weight to that, and you're right, like, Judas Priest say they were metal from the beginning, and listen to those first couple albums, and it really depends on your definition of what metal is, like, when I think of metal, I think of, like, the distortion and things like that, but, I was born in 1986, so, my perception of things is essentially from you know, thrash metal on. And of course, I always take into account everything that came before. But, growing up in that, obviously, I have a different perception of things. So you're 100% right there as far as like, is it a metal fan that grew up in the 70s or is it a metal fan that grew up in the 2000s, Um, so yeah, I'm with you. So as far as Angel Witch, I mean, Angel Witch really has no major awards or anything, and I mean, they went through a lot of changes and hiccups along the way at the very beginning. But there's a lot of bands that cite them as a major influence, including the Big Four, Venom, Celtic Frost, Death, and Candlemass, and they were pioneers in you know. They were technically part of New Album, right? But they were also the guys that influenced what would become more extreme metal too. And I definitely hear that when I listen to their music and look at their album covers and stuff like that.
I think it's the with Angel Witch. I think what really influenced the extreme metal bands was the lyrics, song titles, the covers. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really dark.
Hmm.
And it definitely leads like you could put their albums alongside any of the extreme metal bands and you would not be able to tell the difference just on the surface. Now, obviously, you start listening to it and you're just like, whoa, you know, it's like putting on Led Zeppelin compared to Metallica,
Yeah.
right? It's so extremely different. But I mean, you're right. The big four, Celtic Frost, Death, Candlemass, Testament, all those guys, 6 feet under, Onslaught, you know, all those bands cite Angel Witch, or with some sort of influence. They've all covered them in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
Exodus released the song "Angel of Death," the not the Slayer song, but the Angel Witch song on their "Blood In, Blood Out" album, and that's a pretty cool cover. But you could tell in terms of Exodus's version of it, it's still not as heavy as the stuff that Exodus does. So
Yeah.
that's where you see Angel, which was influential, but they weren't as heavy as they could have been. But they are a heavy metal band. They are part of the new album scene. So they just again like all these bands that shoulda, coulda, woulda. It all starts between personnel and management. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. The setbacks because of those things definitely are a big strike against them. And I would say growing up and being a big fan of Wayne's World, and that being a slight gateway into getting into some metal stuff, and seeing Aerosmith, and I that was one of my earlier concerts that I ever went to as well. I think in a lot of ways that influence is a big thing. And like you said, you made a really good point by saying they were right there in the thick of things with the hair metal. So I mean, I think I'm going to give it to Aerosmith on this one, honestly.
Yeah, I'm leaning Aerosmith only because it's going to be a good fight between them and AC/DC.
That's fair.
Because Angel Witch, I mean, is as much good as they've done for the scene per se, they really, I mean, if they don't exist, these bands still have so many more other influential things to
Yeah.
to to bring them to that extreme. So I like Aerosmith in this particular case.
Okay. All right. Well, that takes us to, well, let's say ACDC and Aerosmith are going to be in our first, well, first winners head to head. Then we're going to move on to Alice in Chains versus At the Gates.
All right. Well, Alice in Chains, many of you know, um, they've been around for a while. I mean, they formed in 1989, and it was weird because they had been around. The name itself was around a few years earlier, but the band that we know and love now um, got together in '89. They released their first album in '90. Six studio albums, three EPs, three live albums, four compilations. And here's the crazy thing about Alice in Chains. There's so much. They're still around today because they have a new singer, they have a new bass player. Not new, but um, they're different from the originals. And while they're still around today, they definitely are one of those bands that you sit there and say, shoulda, coulda, woulda. I mean, they've had successes, but it's like, whoa, like they could have been that much more, but they
True.
they they weren't. So that's an interesting thing about them. And then At the Gates, it's short. um, At the Gates have seven studio albums, one EP, one live album, and one compilation. And At the Gates was formed in 1990.
All right, so I guess we'll get it out of the way. So Alice in Chains, obviously, a lot of people would consider them a grunge band, but I think they're equally a metal band. Their sound has, especially like the first two albums, there's a lot of metal, and they certainly have an influence on things today. They have multiple platinum albums. Dirt was 5 times platinum. Jar of Flies 4 times, Facelift 3 times, and Alice in Chains 2 times, and even their Unplugged MTV album is 1 time platinum. You know, I'm a huge fan of Alice in Chains. I think they're an absolutely fantastic band. Um, and on the other end of the spectrum, I mean, At the Gates is truly massively influential. A lot of the ways that like bands will cite Diamond Head, and obviously Metallica was their biggest fans, and even kind of adopted their sound and style in some ways. At the Gates was the progenitor of that Gothenburg sound that a lot of bands got big from after them. So they kind of stopped right before everything really took off, went with their uh, critically acclaimed album, Slaughter of the Soul. And it's kind of one of those legends in the industry. They're more of how some people say like a guitarist is a guitarist, and it's I think it's the same with At the Gates in a lot of ways, where they're a metal band's metal band.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. The thing with At the Gates is that they had that giant chunk of time where they were inactive. They were just basically defunct.
Yeah.
You can't even call it hiatus, because the band was over. But the renaissance of metal music after the turn of the century, um, it, between all the hair metal bands of the '80s sitting there saying, "Hey, we can still draw a crowd." Um, it basically happened all over the world, and bands started to realize, hey, we still are viable. Some came to the game a little bit later, some jumped on the bandwagon right away. In the case of At the Gates, I mean, they broke up in 1996, in the middle of '96, and didn't get back together until after 2007. So they were gone for quite a while.
Oh yeah, with that Return album though, they did end up winning a Swedish Grammy.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's there's no doubt they're a powerful band. I mean, when you have everyone returning but one person from the original line, actually not even from the original line, from the band that broke up, everybody returned.
Yep.
Okay. And so that's outstanding. You know, it's a shame that they decided to end it after Slaughter of the Soul, because I listened to that recently, and I was just like, you know, I wish I would have listened to this sooner, but I wish I would have had a friend like you sooner to influence me to do that. you know, because like I said, I had that CD and got rid of it somehow. Saying to myself, I'm never gonna listen to this music.
S
But
for me, I mean, just briefly, I got into them after I got into a lot of the Gothenburg, bands. So it was kind of like reverse engineering in a way, and I really saw, like, especially with Slaughter of the Soul, because I do like the earlier albums, but Slaughter of the Soul is like that blueprint of what everybody would do after, and so I always had a massive amount of respect for them, and I don't know if they're gonna continue, with, Thomas Lindbergh having passed away. Um, I somehow doubt it, but you never know. It's one of those bands that, like, because I was so into, melodic death metal, especially from that region of the world. I mean, that's what I got into in the early '90s with Children of Bottom and Flames, Dark Tranquillity, etc. And it's really important to me. But I mean, I have to obviously look at this objectively. And while I get in a lot of ways, like, I think At the Gates deserves it. I don't know if they deserve it more than Alice in Chains, who has had a much wider influence with their massive amount of albums, and or not amount of albums, but amount of accolades with their albums. And I don't know. This one's tough for me. So what do you think?
so I think it's a little tougher for me too. Only, I can sit there and say, well, I obviously know Alice in Chains better. But again, Alice in Chains, like I said, is one of those bands that is shoulda, coulda, woulda,
Mhm.
where you know, At the Gates did what they wanted, and yes, Thomas Lindbergh just passed away recently, and but uh, this week, literally, or just a few weeks ago, the band revealed the title of their eighth album, and it's scheduled for release in April. It's called The Ghost of a Future Dead. So there is some sort of continuation now. How far into the future they continue to go, we don't know.
Yeah,
But
I don't know if they're gonna tour with the music that they recorded for that album, because Thomas sang on that album, and I'm excited to listen to it. I think it'll be really cool. Um, but you know, you're releasing an album with the singer posthumously, right? So there's a possibility they could get other singers to step in, and um, uh, excuse me, you could get other singers to step in and fill in with multiple singers, or kind of like what they've done with Dio. There was a couple bands that had multiple singers that would come in and play the songs and stuff like that. So I don't know, the possibilities are obviously there, so I'm interested to see where it goes.
they're gonna do what they're gonna do something like what Static X does.
Oh, with Zero.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding with that. That's not even remotely close to what they should do.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, look, there's a lot of influence that comes out of At the Gates. I mean, just to know that they basically were the root of the Gothenburg sound
Yeah.
is amazing. You know, um, when you have bands like them, Dark Tranquillity, and In Flames that helped create that sound, just to know that they were part of that, and you know, reformed twice, and to then basically from the second reformation in 2010, late 2010, all the way to now.
Yeah.
That their career now has been longer than it was the first two times combined.
Yeah.
So it's pretty impressive, and they've released albums since that reformation. They've released four albums, which is just as many as they released the first two times they were together. So, well, including the new one that's coming out in April. So it's something to, I think, in this particular case. Alice in Chains has a lot. the question is, are they influential? I mean, yes, they were not considered metal, but they were the most metal of all those bands, and so much so that obviously Jerry Cantrell, basically he got away. He found his way to blend in because that's what they were. They were a hair metal band before they got signed, and they changed to what they are now. And there's a lot to give accolades to Alice in Chains because they're good, but I don't know, something about this one has got me leaning towards At the Gates because of their influence on that whole entire scene up there in Sweden.
I'm gonna agree with you on this one because I think that influence, and just there's so many times I've heard in interviews, etc., how important Slaughter of the Soul is, and I think we need some kind of aspect of that part of the world in this too. So, um, yeah, I think I'm gonna go for At the Gates on this one.
All right, well, they move on.
All right. Well, they are going to go up against the winner of Accept versus Angra.
Accept versus Angra. So basically, we are looking at two power metal bands. Accept, they have been around shit for a long time. Hold on a second. In reality, they started in 1968 as a band called X out of Germany, and then that was with Udo, if I'm not mistaken. And so you got you know, this band that eventually turned into Accept, but they didn't really hit their stride until the late 70s, and then really took off as the power metal band that they are in 1980, or was it 82? Yeah, 82. But anyway, let's go over what they have. They have 17 studio albums, and they have 5 live albums, 9 compilations. So that's impressive stuff. They've been around for a long time. Now, conversely, they're going up against Angra. Angra began in 1991 out of Brazil. They have 10 studio albums, 3 EPs, and 4 live albums. So, what you got with these guys?
So with Angra, it's tough because obviously they don't have a ton of accolades or awards. Um, I became a fan of them pretty early on, and became a fan of really each individual singer that had been with the band. Now I'm not as much of a bigger or a big fan of Fabio, who is their current singer. But Andre Matos and Edu Falaci, I've enjoyed their solo careers. Now that doesn't really matter too much for this, but um, it- I've been a huge fan of this style of music. A lot of reason being that I was a big fan of Angra, and they introduced me to a lot of Latin metal, and I became a fan of Sepultura because of them, and so it's a completely different genre, but when you're looking up the same thing that happened, say when I became a fan of Children of Bottom, I found In Flames, etc. And they're not exactly from the same part of the world. I mean, well, same part of the world, same not same country. And so I think that is a cool thing is that you grow up listening to only what's on the radio, you're going to miss a lot of stuff from all over the world. And just being such an influential band in Latin metal, I think they obviously deserve to make this list. Now, obviously, they're going up against Accept, who is a legend in German metal. 17, I think you said this, but 17 million albums sold worldwide. I mean, they've got a gold album and Balls to the Wall. Huge inspiration to so many bands and just in general. And two eras of the band. You've got Udo and Mark Tornillo that have both been successful and are both awesome. So, what do you think?
So, I'm not uh big on Angra. I never really got into them, but I have listened to them, and I couldn't tell you which singer was what on any song, if you threw it out there at me, only because I just don't know them. I don't know what Andre sounds like. I don't know what was it Edu.
Edu.
You know, I don't know what Edu sounds like. I don't know what Fabio sounds like. So if I hear this song, like I'm pretty positive when I was listening the other day, I was listening to Andre because it was early Angra,
Yeah.
and it's the music outstanding. The musicianship outstanding. For me, I've never been a huge power metal fan, which is weird because I like Priest, I like Accept, I like Manowar, early Manowar, but those were all bands that really kind of formed what power metal would become. And then you got bands you know, like Angra, and you got bands like Hammerfall that really ran with it and turned it
Mhm.
into what it is today, right? And then bands like Manowar continued down that path and have joined that. I mean, Judas Priest is considered to be like, some of the godfathers of power metal. And it wasn't until these last few albums where they really adopted that kind of style and sound to really push that. Firepower, that album, this last album, Invincible Shield, very, very power metal, much more than say Screaming for Vengeance or Defenders of the Faith, right? But
Yeah.
they've really kind of, you know, dug their heels in and said, "Hey, we're going to go with this style," and it works for them. Now going back to Angra and Accept, you've got Angra. They've been around for a while, and their only original member is Raphael Betancourt. Um, three singers: Kiko Loureiro, that everyone knows from Megadeth. He was in there until 2015, and then joined Megadeth. He, amazing guitar player, but I wouldn't know him from Adam if it wasn't for the fact that he played on a Megadeth. You know, so same thing. I don't know any of these guys. That's not to say I shouldn't or I can't. Now, I know Achilles Priester because he was in Wasp. So apparently Angra's the breeding ground for bands to take other bands to take their players. um, but like I said, I've heard them. Excellent musicianship. There's a certain limitation and to their style of music, and you have bands like Accept who take that, who were one of the beginning bands in that style, still around today, and are the masters of it. And Accept have a style, have a setup. I mean, the power background vocals that Accept has stand so far alone in the way that they play music. Like when you hear, especially was like on Balls to the Wall, where you hear those background vocals, just coming through, and they redid that again on several albums. And then when they reformed on Blood of the Nations, that was the style that they came back with. They said, we got away from this, but this is what we're gonna do. You can credit Andy Sneap for that, but um they are they are to me the purveyors of power metal, or one of them at least.
No, I'm with you there. We just saw them recently, and it's such a like it's a small show, but it's so well done. You know, everything is high energy. It's always amazing to see Wolf Hoffman at his age in such great shape and really just guiding the energy of everything. Um, I really enjoy Mark Tornillo as the current singer, and I mean I love Udo. I think both versions of the band are great. I've even spoken how I like the one album that had what's his name David. I can't even think of his name. The XTC album. Um, and so like as a whole,
Oh, you're talking about
and
David Reese.
David Reese. There you go. And as a whole, and as a German, I've got to go with Accept.
That's funny. Um, Man, even Michael Wagner, the producer, was a member of Accept. That was back in the early 70s. I agree with you. I love Mark Tornillo's voice. I mean, it is literally an American version of Udo's voice. It's one of those where you can tell he's got a different voice, but he nails the old stuff perfectly. They're a band that's well rehearsed. You saw that when we were there. I mean, up close and personal. They're right in front of our face. Well rehearsed. They do their moves together. It's so good. Such a good show to watch. Um, and like you said, Wolf Hoffman at his age doing what he does, and I love the fact he never stops smiling. That's a man who's enjoying himself right
Oh,
there.
right.
So
It is a great show. I highly recommend it.
for what it is, I mean, except they've been around for a long time, but they have some classic albums. They have some influence. They're German. They didn't necessarily break through in the United States right away. Um, but when you have a band like, I mean, excuse me, when you have an album like Restless and Wild, where um, Fast as a Shark is considered, one of the first speed metal songs ever to come out, that predated Metallica by a few months technically, but Metallica was formed in '82. This song came out in '82, so it predates them, but it was it was picked up by them really quick. I'll tell you that much. That song made its way around the world very fast. Despite the fact that it was only, I mean, they had a deal with um, CBS Music, I think it was, because wasn't Sony at the time, but w- it wasn't a worldwide deal. So the album had to take its time in terms of getting into America. But then Balls to the Wall hit with that video on MTV, and it was, they took off, but then shot themselves in the foot. I mean, they did have a good album with Metal Heart after that. So I'm leaning towards Accept because they've got the influence, they've got the longevity, and they've got the accolades to go along with it. All three, Angra, very good band out of Brazil, but they're just not there yet. I don't know if they'll ever be there.
Um, yeah, I mean, Andre Matos has passed away, and Eddie Falaci has moved on to. He had his project Alma, which is actually really awesome, and I think he's done some solo stuff as well. Technically, Alma would be solo as well, but it's kind of like saying Dio is solo. Um, and I'm not as big on oh gosh, what's the uh Rhapsody in Fire, which is where Fabio Leone came from, and I like the music. I've never been a huge fan of his voice, but I do definitely do recommend checking out any Angra album. Start with the early stuff, and the first albums that Andre and Edu did, both of those. Check those out; they're really cool. If you ever heard. What's her name? Kate Bush. She did that one song on Stranger Things. If you're a pop culture person, she also did a song called Wuthering Heights, and Angra covered Wuthering Heights, and it's amazing to hear a guy sing the vocals even better. So you're talking high range, and it's cool stuff. So check them out. But I'm still going with Accept.
There you go. So Accept takes it over Angra. They move on to Face at the Gates. So let's see what's next.
So our next two bands are going to be Alter Bridge versus Atreyu.
All right, Alter Bridge versus Atreyu. So Alter Bridge formed in 2004. They have 8 studio albums, 2 EPs, 4 live albums, 1 box set. And Atreyu Formed in 1998, they have 9 studio albums, 6 EPs, and 2 compilations.
Alter Bridge also appeared on one soundtrack. They were on the Daredevil, or not Daredevil. Was it Daredevil or was it Elektra? I think it was Elektra.
Elektra. I didn't put them appearing on a soundtrack unless like AC/DC where they had the whole album.
I gotcha. I'm just
But I get
making a
what
note
you're
of it.
saying.
Yeah.
I get it. They appeared. They appeared.
It's a good song too. It's on the re-released version of their first album, One Day Remains.
I think I had that. I mean, not the album, but I think I had that song. All right, so Alter Bridge. I'm a huge fan. I've been a huge fan since the words. There's a new band coming out named Alter Bridge with the guys from Creed and God, I can't remember. I know Miles. I can't remember the name of the band now. But Miles Kennedy's band at the time. So
Mayfield
Alter
4.
Bridge. That's right, the Mayfield 4. I had heard about the Mayfield 4 prior to Alter Bridge.
I had their last album. I found it. So I'm trying to remember exactly how I found it, but there was, funny enough, Smallville. Smallville, way back in the day. If you've never seen it, it was the Superman show about Clark before he was ever Superman. And they had every week, I want to say like third or fourth season, they started having a song from some band featured, and it would, when it would go to commercial break, it would say, the song on this episode is whoever, right? And there was a couple tracks that I ended up liking, and it was it on iTunes. The only time I have ever had an Apple device, I had the iPod 2, I think it was, or second generation, and maybe it was third generation, doesn't really matter. But it was that early days, and when you went on iTunes and you looked up those songs, it would recommend other songs that were by similar bands, obviously, and that were also on those shows. People were buying the same stuff, a lot of CW crap, and I had found them through that. I found Mayfield 4, and I'm trying to remember which song it was, but so I had actually listened to them before Alter Bridge came out.
If I'm not mistaken, I have the Mayfield 4 album.
Mhm.
And I had it before I knew about Alter Bridge and all that stuff. And I just never listened to it because I got a lot of promos, in my time there at the record store. And I
The
think
song was called Eden Turn the Page. It was from their second album, Second Skin.
I think I have the first album, but regardless, that for me, I was excited when I heard that basically Creed had reformed with a new singer. But they were so not wanting to be Creed. But you listen to the first album, to me, there's so much Creed influence in there because you have no choice. You have the guys from Creed. And so, but they made a conscious effort after that first album, very conscious effort not to sound like Creed. And actually are a lot more heavier than Creed, especially man, this last album's so heavy in so many different ways. They still have a lot of, you know, uh, light stuff, that they typically have, but it was one of those things where um, I was so impressed by how heavy some of these songs really were, and I'm like, damn,
Yeah,
they
I
went
think.
back in time.
I mean, starting with the second album, I mean, there's some pretty heavy stuff, but Fortress they got really heavy with, and I think Last Hero has quite a bit of heavy stuff. Walk the Sky, I think, was a little step back. But Pawns and Kings has some really awesome metal riffs on there too. And yeah, I haven't listened to the newest album enough, but I really like it so far. So I need to give it definitely some more listens. But yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely, a metal band. I think some people would say, well, they're hard rock, but I would say they're alternative metal, progressive metal in some ways, even. Um, And man, we've seen them live once. It was a great show. Lot of fun. I mean, they've one gold album with their first album, and to me, they're just so underrated. I think there may be some people who still like think, oh, they're Creed without Creed, but I think for the most part they avoided that stigma. You know,
Yeah,
they're they're just kind of underrated.
I agree with you. And what's here's just the sad part. Like so many people hear about the fact that they're the guys from Creed that a lot of people do not give them a fair shake.
Yeah.
I mean I used to communicate, and I'll put it that way. I used to communicate via messenger with this guy up in New Jersey. And I told him something. The guy was looking for one of the albums, and I ordered it from him because he was like reselling CDs. And he's like, "You like that band?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "They're awesome." And he goes, "Nah." He goes, "The singer's is not as good as the guy from Creed." And I'm like, "It has nothing to
And
do with
he's so
anything."
much better.
I mean, one, he's so much better. I mean, he's so much more talented in terms of his voice, right? But you know, there is something about his voice naturally that is you kind of have to acquire a taste for it because of that nasally sound that
Yeah.
Miles has. But that's fine. I don't look at the bands as competing bands. I don't look them as the same members with a different singer, what they are, because they are two different bands. Freaking Mark Tremonti writes different songs for Creed, writes different songs for um Alter Bridge. He writes different songs for Tremonti, and he writes different songs for his own solo shit. Like I don't even understand that because the guy has a band called Tremonti. It's his band, but yeah, he still does a solo album. The fuck is that? You know, and then he has Alter Bridge, which is his band, you know, and so it's crazy. But with all that said, they are a fantastic band, and I have the ultimate respect for Mark and Scott Phillips because when they broke up with Creed, excuse me, when Creed broke up and they decided they were going to get back together and form a band, and they brought in Miles, the first person that they called to play bass was Brian Marshall. And then when Creed got back together, it was basically Mark said, "We'll get back together," but Brian comes back and we're playing guitar solos. And
Hell yeah.
so, and that was literally they came back and they did that. Now they're back together again touring. But now it looks like 2026. There's a couple Creed shows because they're playing here in Houston in a few
They're gonna
weeks.
be at the rodeo.
Yeah, they're gonna be at the rodeo. But
My
after that,
sister my sister's debating whether she's gonna go or not. She has a ticket.
oh
And
man,
she's like,
there's
"It's
no
on a
debate.
Wednesday." All
There's
right.
no
I'm
debate.
like,
I'm gonna
"Just
be there.
go."
Exactly. I mean, look, for what you can sit there and pick apart Creed all you want. The fact is they're still a good fucking band, and they had some heavy shit too. I'll tell you that second album was pretty damn heavy, even though it had, With Arms Wide Open. Listen to the rest of the album because With Arms Wide Open is an anomaly on that album. Okay.
Well, back to Alter Bridge, and Atreyu. We haven't really even discussed
No,
Atreyu
we
yet.
haven't talked about Atreyu. So look, this is what I'm going to say about Atreyu. Um, they're a metalcore band, okay, and yay. So, look, I don't have anything against metalcore. My problem with that scene at that time, so they form in '98, and that's when a lot of those metalcore bands started after the new wave of American heavy metal bands like Shadows Fall and God Forbid and Lamb of God started to take off. Those guys were the leaders. Metalcore just exploded. Ozfest created more metalcore bands than you can shake a stick at. But here's the problem: they all sound the same, and that has been my problem with these it's funny here when you hear the singers. Or what does he do? He does unclean vocals. That's like, I'm not even going to say it. The bottom line is that you can't you can't you can't differentiate one singer from another. It's very hard. All right. And so to me, what are these bands doing to differentiate themselves in general? The music all sounds the same. They all do a breakdown. So I don't get it. Obviously Lamb of God was different. Their style, the way they play guitars, the odd time changes in the middle song, those things are unique. And Randy Blythe's vocals are different. Okay. It's always growling, but at the same time, he has a style, he has a unique voice. Brian Fair, same thing with Shadows Fall. Okay. So it was he had a unique voice. These guys in metalcore, I don't hear it. I don't hear unique voices. So in this particular case with Atreyu, I think to me, they don't sound much different than 10 of the other metalcore bands that were out at the same time. And probably someone's yelling at me over there somewhere in the Midwest going, "Are you fucking insane?" Well, maybe I am, but that's my opinion.
I mean, you know how I feel about metalcore in general. I mean, I've warmed up to some of it a little more as time has gone on, um, just by the merits of um, there's some really cool guitar solos and stuff like that. It really depends on the band. I've never been a breakdown guy. I don't like when the rhythm mirrors exactly what the melody's doing too. So there's those are metalcore staples. That being said, I listened to as much as I could. I respect that they're a good band for what they do. Um, that being said, I don't I don't enjoy it, so it's hard for me to want to vote for it. Um, I mean, just statistics wise, like they have 2 gold albums, which is really cool. Um, it just for me personally, and maybe it's biased, but I feel like Alter Bridge has been more visible than Atreyu for sure. Um, and I feel like they're a bigger band in a lot of ways.
For the life of me, I would never have thought that those 2 albums went gold. Um, shit, that's an accomplishment for
Yeah,
that time period, 2004 and 2007.
I mean that's the
Um,
heyday.
yeah, I mean that's the end of the record sales days, that type of stuff. But yeah, the fact that they did that, I mean, that's great. So that means that they were there. People liked their stuff. I get that. You know,
Mhm.
to me, it's just so difficult to tell one from the other. When I went to see Ozfest, if I'm not mistaken, they were at one of the Ozfests that were there. Now, I saw so many bands. I saw in shit. I saw In Flames. Had no idea. You know, um, because again, when you're at these open air venues and you just hear riffing all over the place and some guy with a guttural vocal and then someone else screaming, it's not a lot to sit there and say, who is that? Because you don't know. You don't even know what you're listening to. So that's why like a song from Hatebreed, Live for This, that was so fucking catchy. That's why I to this day, I remember that song. That I couldn't name 3 songs from Hatebreed, but I could name you Live for This because of how catchy that chorus is, you
Yeah.
know? And that's the other thing too. I mean, they were one of the leaders of metalcore, and yet, they don't have that same kind of style. It's more it's more extreme to some degree, but they had a catchy song with "Live for This." I give it to Alter Bridge on so many different levels.
I'm with you. All right. So Alter Bridge will be taking on the winner of Amon Amarth versus As I Lay Dying.
Okay, so we now have As I Lay Dying versus Amon Amarth. Okay, so let's go with Amon Amarth first here. Amon Amarth was formed in 1992. They have 12 studio albums, 3 EPs, and 1 compilation. And As I Lay Dying was formed in 2000. They have 8 studio albums and 2 compilations. So what do you got?
All right. So As I Lay Dying, um, pretty influential on the metalcore scene. Um, they have 1 gold album, This Is Who We Are, and that went platinum in Canada for all our Canadian listeners. And we have, or they have, we have, they have 1 Grammy nomination.
What album is This Is Who We Are? Oh, that's the video. That's a video album.
It's a video, yeah.
Okay.
And then Amon Amarth, they have 12 albums. No real major accolades aside from Metal Hammer Golden God Awards 2009 as the breakthrough act. And they're highly influential on kind of creating what would become the Viking metal genre, even though they don't call themselves Viking metal. They have Vikings rowing in their concerts. It's always funny to me when you have bands that protest about what they are, like Motorhead saying they're not a metal band, and they're literally up on stage playing metal. But yeah, that's cool. I love Amon Amarth. I've never gotten to see them live, and you continue that streak. So
You're gonna get to see him in 2 months. I'm not.
yeah. But for me, um, man, I'm so not a metalcore guy that it's hard for me to get into As I Lay Dying. There's obviously a stigma on the band due to Tim Lambesis and his history. No real reason to get into that, but the guy has had a ton of stop and starts due to his behavior and things that he's done. And for somebody that had built themselves up to be a major player in the industry, well, setbacks galore. So as far as influence, I think Amon Amarth to me has a much bigger influence. Kind of creating a whole genre of metal, and really kind of sticking out as like maybe not the best players in the world, but at the same time, um, just really reliable, really like fun to listen to. Like I always have a good time listening to them. And Johan Hegg, man, what a freaking voice.
I love Johan. So, you know, Amon Amarth, man, if you remember watching that metal show and Don Jameson constantly talking about Amon Amarth, and I'm like, what is with this band? And he just kept talking about Amon Amarth and Amon Amarth. And part of the fact that he kept talking about him is because Don signed to Metal Blade Records just like Amon Amarth is. But man, you know, you kind of allowed me to accept death metal and death metal style music and vocals as it came to me, right? But when you and I first started talking, one band that I said I really wanted to listen to was Amon Amarth,
Mm-hmm.
and I listened to them because they began. Well, I'm trying to think when they released this album. Okay, so Berserker came out in 2019, right? So it was right before Berserker came out that you and I became friends, and we started talking about um, metal. And then Berserker comes out, and then that first song, um, the first song that opens the album, Fafner's Gold, is to me a tribute to Metallica because I thought that the whole intro was they were stealing from Battery, but it's slightly different. Um, and I began to really, this is fucking cool. The whole Viking, stuff to it, I thought was great because I'm watching the show Vikings at the same time. So there's like, wow, this is pretty cool. They should be playing this music during the show. And
Right.
then, and then just the fact that I began to understand the way the vocals were. Like if you listen to early Amon Amarth, really, really death sounding, um, almost Cannibal Corpse like in some cases, which that turned me off. But you then begin to realize it really isn't that way, and you start catching more and more, and the just the rhythms and stuff like that are so cool. The melodic part of the metal that they play, and they have since, even Brian Slagle, who owns Metal Blade Records, has said they're not really that melodic death metal band anymore that they used to be. They're much more mainstream than they are. Still very heavy, still very fast, and still, have that style to them, but they've opened themselves up so much more now. It's pretty incredible the way they um have changed so much, and a lot of people sit there and say, well, that's not the greatest thing in the world, but they don't like, they're not like In Flames. They didn't change like In Flames,
No, no,
you
not at
know,
all.
but they definitely have, if you want to say, slowed down in their old age to some degree. I mean, Metallica can still do it if they wanted to, but you could tell that they're older. They, you know, Amon Amarth is still pretty fast, and their drummer's amazing. Um,
There's a maturity to it. Yeah, I agree.
right now, on the flip side, this band, As I Lay Dying, y- you know, I could get critical if I wanted to. I'm gonna probably refrain from a lot of stuff that I might want to say. I'm not a big fan. Um, not because um the music doesn't hit me or anything like that. Tim Lambesis is basically, I've gotten to the point where if I don't like a guy in the band, I don't like the band, you
That's
know.
fair.
And to some of the stuff that he did, and to sit there and say when they came out that they were um kind of, they're Christians in a band, or are they a Christian metal band? And to sit there and say, I don't know what the difference is," and then do what he did, to me, you need to drop that whole Christianity thing in your band and just be a metalcore band. And I when I found out about that stuff, and I'm like, dude, you're not following, you know. I don't try to proclaim myself as being this staunch Christian, because I'm not. I grew up in that realm, and when I moved to Texas, I immersed myself in that realm again. After literally not doing anything for the 20 years that I lived in Miami, I never went to church. I went to church because there was a funeral. Um, I don't. I That just was my thing. I came here. My wife and I wanted to go to church, and then we stopped. That's my personal choice. I don't like the fact that that was encapsulated as part of what As I Lay Dying is, and that was another turn off. And then Tim Lambesis' personal issues, another turn off. So I was like, you know what, it's not my thing. So that being said, I am going for Amon Amarth.
No, that's fair. For me, I am a believer that you go to jail, you serve your sentence. That's part of our rules. That being said, there are some crimes that are more heinous than others, and um, you know, I think sometimes deserve harsher punishments, and sometimes less harsh punishments. So we're not lawyers here, so I'm not going to go into that. But at the same time, um, just I don't feel like As I Lay Dying had the influence that Amon Amarth has. Just making it strictly about the music. Um, I listen to some stuff. They're competent. They're good at what they do. But it's not for me. And I think Amon Amarth has obviously had lasting appeal, whereas as I Lay Dying has, um, petered off. I think the entire band left a couple years ago, and then he's hired new musicians to play, and that's never a good sign either. So I'm definitely awarding this one to Amon Amarth.
There we go. So we move on.
Okay.
All right. So what do we got next?
Our next head to head is going to be Avenged Sevenfold versus Arch Enemy.
All right, Avenged Sevenfold. They were formed in 1999. They have 8 studio albums, 2 EPs, 1 live album, and 2 compilations. They hold on a second. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 platinum albums. So that's that. They've had some success. And I give it to them. They have done some unique things recently with their career, as far as like the album, The Stage, that that dropped out of nowhere. Nobody even knew it was coming. They barely knew it was coming. They literally nothing. There was zero warning with this album coming out. So they've got a unique recent history. Um, and they're going up against Arch Enemy, who formed in 1995 in Sweden. They are a melodic death metal band. They have 13 studio albums, 5 EPs, 3 live albums, and 2 compilations. So you and I were talking about these Arch Enemy the other day, and I, I wasn't necessarily a big fan of Arch Enemy, but I will tell you this. I am more willing to listen to them now after what I've heard from the album from when they first had what's her face, Angela, right?
Angela Gosso.
Yeah, when Angela first joined the band, that first album was pretty awesome. And then you know they had Alyssa. I know some of her songs, which are cool. And then now they have this new female singer named Lauren Hart. I heard the song, some of the song is pretty cool as well. So I like what I hear, and that's for sure. I wasn't expecting this because I had heard like one song that was just to me. I don't know why I happened to hear that one song at that one time, and it turned me off. But when I re-listened to the stuff in anticipation of this series, I was like, hey, you know what? This is pretty good shit. So I'm down with it. I'm willing to listen to more. I like that. And going up against Avenged Sevenfold, hmm, you know, I don't know, man. Avenged Sevenfold, it was one of those bands that I just never got into. I don't know what do you, and I'm not done with Avenged Sevenfold, but what was your take on Avenged?
So I used to not like them at all, and that was, I think, some level of immaturity on my end where I saw bands that looked or sounded screamo in my opinion, and even if they weren't, I just had an attitude about it because I was young and dumb. And in recent years, I've gone and listened to some of their stuff. Like I think "Hail to the King" is a really awesome song. I actually have been I every time we do any of these projects, I take time and I listen to everything, and I try to at least immerse myself a little bit into their biggest hits and things like that. Well, I listened to their biggest hits, and I was like, there's a lot of soft stuff that are, I think, their most popular songs. So I went and listened to more of the albums, and I really got into Nightmare. I think it's a really fun album. um Hail to the King, their or self-titled album, and yeah, some of the, I think, middle era stuff, I think, is really what works for me the most. Um, but man, I mean, they have 4 platinum albums. They have a Grammy for The Stage. Um, They have two number one albums back to back, Nightmare and Hell of the King. So statistics wise, I mean they've got some pretty big accolades. As far as Arch Enemy, I've been a fan for much longer. I I got into them kind of early, but I never really liked Johann's voice back in the day. So I always kind of thought, I like the music, but I'm not really into them. Um, that being said, I there were like they had a an instrumental called Stigmata, which I really liked, and some cool stuff. So I always had them kind of on the back burner, not really thinking much of them. And then when Angela Gosso joined, Wages of Sin is such a good album. I really liked them a lot, and it was cool because at the time she was really the only extreme metal female singer that I could even think of. I mean, that's a pretty big influence in that aspect of things. Like, I think she opened the gateways to a lot of people, and I really liked a lot of the stuff that they did. But sometimes I felt like some of the riffs were derivative of other things, especially during this era. So I was always kind of mixed. Like they had some songs that I just absolutely loved, and then other times I would hear it and I'd be like, man, that sounds exactly like an In Flames song, or something along those lines. And so I was always just kind of in the middle of things. Then in 2014, they released War Eternal. War Eternal, I think, was just absolutely amazing. It's still one of my favorite metal albums. But as time went on with Alyssa as their singer, I just I don't like her, and I started to like her vocals less too. Some of the stuff they were doing, they brought Jeff Loomis into the band, and I thought that was a weird fit. And I mean, I love Jeff Loomis. I think he's an absolutely fantastic guitarist. I saw him live, and his solo stuff. Nevermore is pretty awesome, and I don't know, it was a weird fit. So I really dropped off of them in the last 10 years, and I heard their new single with Lauren Hart, and man, it is killer. But that being said, like I think the influence of Avenged Sevenfold and the longevity, the staying power, and they're continuing to have these accolades. It makes it a bit of a tough fight, because I think that influence of the female singer, and what Angela did is important for sure. But also think Avenged Sevenfold just has this, recognizability and staying power that makes them pretty big too.
This one was a tough one for me because you've got a band like Arch Enemy that's just been around for so long, and have they're part of that, um, the melodic death metal scene, and they have this amount of influence, and they've had great albums. They've got a lot of albums, and I gotta hand it to Mike Lamont. It's Amat, right? Is how you say it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta hand it to him. He knows what he wants, and he wants a female vocalist,
Mhm.
and he's had 3 of them now. And so to get away from that, from after having a male vocalist in Johan in the band, and then saying, "You know what? I'm gonna change," and I changed to this female, and now he really wants female vocalists. That's amazing. That's awesome. More power to him for that, and sticking to his guns with that. Avenged Sevenfold for me. So there's that period of time where I didn't know who Avenged Sevenfold was. All that emo shit sounded the same to me, and not even sounded. It's just I couldn't get into that whole style of vocals. Some of it was very whiny, um, and I didn't know who was who because I had gotten away from the music scene, for such a while, and then slowly but surely I got back into it and I started listening more and more to it. But by that time, all those bands had already established themselves, and for whatever reason, it's very difficult for me to go backwards. I really, really have to want to deep dive, and that's the great thing about the show that we've got. It has allowed me and you to both go back in time to listen to these bands and really accept them for who they are. I haven't done a ton of deep diving on Avenged Sevenfold. I do like um, Hail to the King. They've got some really good tracks on there. Um, this Means Wars is a song I've got on my playlist. You know, Hail to the King is a song I got on my playlist. I don't have Shepherd of Fire on there. Those are the big singles that they had on this album, but I do have this album on my phone. Now, that being said, you know, I to me it's a toss up between these. I'm probably going to be leaning towards Avenged Sevenfold only because of their success. You know, and it's unfair to Arch Enemy because Arch Enemy's from Sweden and they don't have the same type of ability to have that kind of success here in the States.
That's if true and untrue, and I'm mostly in agreement there. But man, I'm actually leaning towards Avenged Sevenfold as well. I think Arch Enemy has a very important place, but I think also Avenged Sevenfold has a unique style within the genre they fit in, and therefore they actually um, in a lot of ways are innovators. And I think all of the musicians in the band are really masters of what they do too. Like I think Sinister Gates is an excellent lead guitarist. And it has done some really interesting stuff. And I think the funny thing is they have these goofy names, Zaki Vengeance and M Shadows, and I think that turns some people off, and that's fine. But at the same time, like look past it and just actually listen to what they do. And um, I think the Rev, who was their drummer up until he passed away, was an excellent drummer too. And they end up having to get Mike Portnoy, to come on and play the album that he was supposed to play on. And they needed somebody that could fill that role because he was such a good drummer too. So, yeah, I mean, I think just from that perspective, like I have a lot of stuff I really love about Arch Enemy. That being said, I don't know if it puts them above, Avenged Sevenfold with the accolades that they have and the fact that they're not just followers, they were innovators within a genre.
Right. And I agree with that because you like you said, they had these goofy names, and then maybe that was what the turnoff is. I mean, like you said, Zaki Vengeance, Sinister Gates, M Shadows, and then they got a bassist Johnny Christ. I mean, and then of course, then you get Brooks Wackerman to join after after the Rev dies, and yeah, Portnoy filled in for a bit, but Wackerman, who's been around forever, it's one of those things where
He
you know
didn't get a cool name.
no, he doesn't get a cool name. Maybe they call him the Whack or something like that. Who knows? But the dude's been around. I mean, he played with Suicidal. He played with Infectious Grooves, and I knew about this band, Bad for Good. They were when he was young. That was when he was first coming up.
Yeah.
So Brooks, yeah, he didn't get the cool name, but that by that time it was like that was over with, man.
Yeah.
So and the fact that now they're all what? How old is M now? He's in his he's 40.
70s.
He's in his 40s, right? You got get over the thing. Like Zaki Vengeance, he's 44 years old. He ain't a kid anymore. Zaki, come on. And we don't even know Sinister Gates is real. Oh yeah, we do. Is Brian
Yeah.
his real name? He's in his 40s. Now I'll tell you what. You want to talk about a cool wacky name? Zoltan Bathory from Five Finger Death Punch, and you can't find what his real name is. So
Yeah.
anyhow, I'm with you on Avenged Sevenfold there.
All right. Well, that brings us to our last head to head of the first round, and that is Anthrax versus Armored Saint.
Anthrax versus Armored Saint. Anthrax formed in 1983. 11 studio albums, 4 EPs, 7 live albums, 5 compilations. Six gold and one platinum album plus a platinum video. And then you've got Armored Saint. Armored Saint has 8 studio albums, one EP, two live albums, three if you count Symbol of Salvation Live, which I believe was just a digital release, and one compilation. So when I was setting up these brackets, you gave me we came together with the names. You gave me the idea for the brackets. I went ahead and rearranged it. I kind of put this one this way on purpose because it's John Bush versus John Bush to some degree. um, I don't know. I'm gonna sit there. I mean, I already know what my answer is, but look, Anthrax has had an incredibly unique career. Oddly enough, in their own right, Armored Saint has had as oddly a unique career. However, two different things, two different time periods to some degree. There was overlap early on. Then obviously John Bush overlapped, and now they're not. John's back with Armored Saint full time. I you know I'm a big fan of both bands. Anthrax is one of my favorite bands of all time, but Armored Saint, and this goes all the way back to all the people that screamed at me for picking John Bush as one of the most influential singers. Um, you know, I love John. His voice is amazing. Does accolades win this one for Anthrax, or is Armored Saints ability to stay relatively the same from beginning to now? Does that kind of steadiness, hold out? What is your thoughts on those two bands?
I mean, as much as I love Armored Saint, and um, I've enjoyed seeing them live every time, and John Bush is, I think, most himself when he's with Armored Saint because that's really his band, whereas Anthrax had history before that, right? And two singers before him. So that is tough in that regard, but Armored Saints is also a band that largely went overlooked for a long period of time. And that's unfortunate because I think they were such a talented band and they were just with the wrong company that was not supporting them. And I think that's the best way to describe it is they just weren't getting support. Um, but that's just how the cookie crumbles, right? And at the same time, Anthrax, like you said, 6 Grammy nominations, multiple gold albums. They've huge amount of sales across the world, 10 million records. Um, you know, um, Two really dynamic singers that both carried their eras that they were in the bands. So, I mean, and they're a member of the Big Four. That's another thing to keep in mind. Like that level of influence, is a big thing in this competition. So, um, you you walked up on the street and asked some people like, "Have you heard of Anthrax? Have you heard of Armored Saint?" You probably get more people saying they've heard of Anthrax. Um, do I like them more than Armored Saint? No, but do I think they're a bigger contender for this? I think so.
And I would tend to at the whole of Anthrax's career. Unique is what I said at the beginning because they've done, for a while there, their albums from, the first one all the way, to Persistence of Time. Even and look, even the John Bush stuff. And then, when you look at all the albums that they've done from Fistful of Metal all the way to worship music, okay? Every single one, I would say, all the way up until We Come For You all those albums, they're all different. Every single one of them is different. You could not tell me that think that the band that put together Among the Living was the same band that did Spreading the Disease. You can't tell, oh yeah, or there's a similar, because there isn't. There's more of a similarity of Among the Living to State of Euphoria than any two albums that they have until Worship Music and For All Kings. You know, and White Noise, thing like Stomp, this is different, and Volume 8 is just in many cases out of left field. You know, so it's so unique. That's what I like about their career. But at the same time, you would, in your favorite band, you want consistency, and now you have it. So let's see what happens. I think it's coming out in May of this year. Let's see what happens when their new album comes out after 10 years. You know, for
Yeah.
Anthrax. As far as Armored Saint's concerned, I love Armored Saint. Yes, I've been listening to the Gary Holt book on Exodus, and man, bad management will screw you up every time. And Exodus shoulda, coulda, woulda, but at the same time, they purposely, and this is on Gary, they stuck to a certain kind of vocal style. They stuck to a certain kind of lyrical topic that was always going to limit them, always.
Yeah.
And when you have, even the fact that Slayer chose to go down that dark path, or got darker and darker, even they went away from some of the matter and they just made it a little bit more personal. And sometimes they would throw certain things in there, but man, Exodus just shot themselves in the foot at every corner. But we're not talking about them. Anthrax, and Armored Saint, Armored Saint's lack of good management and just the record company that they signed with and the choices that they've made. It's unfortunate. I love them to death. That they are been one of the most consistent bands when it comes to releasing albums. You know, Symbol of Salvation should have done so much better than it did, but in this case, I'm going to lean it towards Anthrax just because even though they're uniquely different on almost every album, that's part of what makes them great. And they have super, super influential. Big Four band.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I love Armored Saint, but I got to go with Anthrax.
All right. So that is the first round. It's done. So now we have our next round up. So we got ACDC versus Aerosmith, At the Gates versus Accept, Alter Bridge versus Amon Amarth, and Avenged Sevenfold versus Anthrax. So obviously, we've already talked a shit ton about every band. So this shouldn't take a long time to get through, but we have some good matchups here. What are your thoughts on ACDC versus Aerosmith?
Yeah, that is in the perspective of they're both probably the least metal on these lists, but they both have some history. Like you said, you had a good point earlier, about where they sit in the timeline of metal too. So, ACDC has sold the most albums of anybody on this list. So I don't know how you if across the world you haven't heard of ACDC. So they have that massive reach. Aerosmith has two distinct eras. They have their early timeline, and then they have the comeback era. And their comeback era is even bigger in a lot of ways than the early days and their popularity there. They reached massive appeal with Armageddon. They had the soundtrack, Don't Want to Close My Eyes, or I think those are the lyrics. Just massive appeal. Steven Tyler has been on TV show after TV show at this point. ACDC still kicking. They're still playing. Obviously, several original members are gone at this point, and Angus is really the lifeblood there. But Aerosmith is not. They're not still playing together. Retired a couple years ago, correct? I think it was 2023 or 2024.
Yeah, due to Steven Tyler's vocal problems that he
Yeah.
didn't have any problem with at the, you know, back to the beginning. But it's been a couple years, so
Yeah. Um, and so there's a lot of similarities there. They've both have multi-platinum albums. Both have an influence in the early days of heavy metal in some capacity. And that being said, what is your opinion before I say what I'm thinking?
so to kind of I don't want to say if it was counter, but you mentioned that ACDC is sold more albums. I Let's take into consideration that both these bands, in all actuality, when you come to accolades and awards, Aerosmith is virtually equal to ACDC. 25 gold albums, 18 platinum, one diamond, 9 gold singles and 4 platinum singles, compared to ACDC's 21 gold albums and 14 platinum albums and one diamond album. That one diamond album is huge because that is like the number one selling hard rock album of all time.
Yeah.
Um,
But
so
AC/DC sold 200 million records versus Aerosmith's 133. So,
right, and I knew that because ACDC has a bigger worldwide audience than
yeah,
Aerosmith. Aerosmith is the most decorated American band in history,
yeah,
with Kiss right behind them, and I think Metallica behind that. So, um, so there is that, right? They're both blues based hard rock bands, so there's a lot of equivalence there. AC/DC definitely heavier. Um, the change from Highway to Hell to Back in Black was enormous.
yeah,
Um, and they kept that sound all the way up to now. Even because they went back to being more blues based, even though they've always been blues based, but they went back to more of the style that they did in the 70s when they got to the Ball Breaker album, and it's kind of stuck ever since Phil Rudd kind of came back into the band. They went back to that 70s style ACDC that they played. They weren't doing as much of the Back in Black style from the 80s. You know, for the sake of this show, for the sake of what we're doing here, I lean towards AC/DC.
I'm actually with you there. I tend to think of Aerosmith as a hard rock band. That being said, I also consider AC/DC to much be the same. But if you were to ask me straight up, which one is more metal, I easily say AC. All the stuff they did on back in black. A lot of the stuff they did on uh, what's the name? Razor's Edge and subsequent albums around time. Um, I tend to think they have more of a metal edge, so I'm going to go with AC/DC.
And I agree, definitely a more metal edge. Back in Black, for those about to rock, Flick of the Switch, that 3 series of albums right there were, as heavy as it gets for AC/DC. And you couldn't there's not a person in the 80s you could tell me that AC/DC wasn't a metal band.
Yeah,
Okay. It just, it wasn't
perception
Metallica
changed
metal.
now, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but perceptions have changed now because when you look back at it, it's the same as, in the 70s, Black Sabbath is a heavy metal band, but, they changed.
yeah.
So,
No, I'm with
anyhow,
you. Yeah.
okay. So now we have At the Gates versus Accept.
Um, well, tell me what your thoughts are first before I've gone first many times today.
Okay. I mean, with when it comes to accepting At the Gates, we talked about the influence of At the Gates, being there at the beginning of the Gothenburg sound and the whole melodic death metal. Um, but for me, Accept, I mean, you're talking about a band that, at its inception started in 1968. That's 58 years this year. Yeah, it wasn't the same band that it is now, but let's look at what the band became after they released Breaker. Breaker had the initial stylings of what they would become. Restless and Wild, obviously first speed metal song or first power metal song, however you want to look at it. Um, it took what Motorhead did with Overkill, and it took it one step faster and excuse me, one step farther and 10 times faster per se. You know, so they to me are more I don't want to say they're the bigger band for sure, but to me they have more influence and more going for them, or I don't know how you want to put it. They're they're just that much more than At the Gates.
Um, man, I'm in agreement, honestly. Um, except to me, like when I think of what they look like, what they sound like, their stage presence, each version of them, they've always been metal. Even before um they took on the appearance that they do now with more leather and that kind of stuff. You know, I think one of the early things from their image that the record label didn't like was Udo wore um how do you describe it? Like
The fatigues.
yeah, kind of frumpy look, and they were fatigues and stuff like that. And so there was this lack of cohesion in their image. But as time went on, that image to me, like when I think of Accept, is more the leather and the style that much like Judas Priest, right? And the music has only gotten heavier with time. um at the Gates, they have a very important part in metal history, but I think just the influence that Accept has had, the longevity, the consistency from the very beginning. Obviously, yeah, you only have one original member, but that being said, Wolf Hoffman has been the primary songwriter for the longest amount of time, and it's his band in all honesty at this point. So um, I'm leaning towards Accept on the merits of their accolades, one, but also their influence.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's where it hits the highest, if you want to put it that way. All right, so that brings us to Alter Bridge versus Amon Amarth.
Um, well, this one's maybe not that tough for me. Even though um I would say in a lot of ways I'm probably a bigger Alter Bridge fan. Amon Amarth is in a lot of ways I think um a modern gateway into metal. And what I mean by that is like they are not the most complicated band. They're easy to get into, especially with the popularity of Norse mythology and as far as an extreme metal band, I think they are a really good gateway into larger aspects of this music. And being such a big part of what metal is today, I think that we really have to look at, a band that is in the genre of extreme metal and the influence that has on today's metal scene. And for me, I've got to go with the Monomarth on this one.
You know, Creed's going to be here next month. And right after that, Alter Bridge is going to be here in April. So Mark Tremonti and the band and Scott and Brian will be here 2 months in a row, but two different styles of music. Is Alter Bridge metal? Many people will say no, but I, like you, agree that it's more alternative metal. There's some heavy shit in there, man. You cannot tell me that Metal Lingus is not metal. It's got metal in its name.
Yeah.
Damn it.
And Lingus.
Why'd you go there for, man?
I just said Lingus. I didn't say what type.
Why'd you have to go down that avenue?
Hey, sometimes you got to. You really love your
Yes.
partner. But
Exactly. That being said, I'm agreeing with you. Amon Amarth, I mean, they're the gateway to extreme metal. I like that idea. I will almost put that similar sound gateway for In Flames now. Is in that same
yeah,
realm,
no, there's definitely a similarity there.
So Amon Amarth, I mean, we're talking. This is a metal show, so we're talking about a band that fuck, they're Viking metal. Skull, god damn it, they're good. So I'm in agreement with you on that. Amon Amarth moves on.
All right. So, what do we got left?
Last but not least, we have Anthrax versus Avenged Sevenfold. I think you know where I'm heading with this one. I just was never an emo goth guy, so uh, you know what? And I tell you what, when Anthrax was wearing shorts, skateboard shorts or what do they call them, Bermuda shorts or swim shorts, I was like, what the fuck are you doing, guys? They didn't look like the same band that was on the back of the Among the Living. That was the look. I loved that look. And then all of a sudden, they release
It was the
the
90s,
next year.
brah.
And it wasn't even the 90s, dude. The next year when they released I'm the Man, they were in shorts on the back. It was 1987
Yeah.
or it was 88,
I tend to, in my mind, in this microcosm of my mind, I tend to think of like 88 to like 98 as the 90s, Yeah, and it's funny because I think every decade is kind of like that. Like the tent poles of what style is and music is tend to coincide with the end of the previous decade and die out before the beginning of the next decade. And so
Right. I understand that. Yeah.
a lot of people think of the 90s as, just strictly the 90s. I don't. I think of it kind of as the tail end of the 80s into the tail end of the 90s.
No, I mean, I can see what you're saying. Like for me, the '80s, the '80s includes a lot of late '70s stuff,
Yeah.
and it includes a lot of early '90s stuff. My '80s is a little bit bigger. It's almost like a 12 to 13 year span,
Yeah, that's fair too.
right?
That's fair too because
Where
there's
the
overlap. Yeah.
Right, and then the '90s is the same thing. '90s goes from '89 because '89 was that literally that cutoff year for hair metal. Okay, there was a lot of hair metal came out in '89, but none of it fucking lasted a year, you know, and very few. Let me not say none, but very few of it lasted a year or two. And then you got the '90s, and you had these anomalies because you had all these grunge bands, but you had anomalies like Metallica, you had anomalies like Pantera, um, and Van Halen continued down that same path for certain things. So I agree with you on that. They don't necessarily mean from 1980 to 1989, but I get what you're saying. For you, at least, Anthrax was that way. Because I was there. I was there when Among the Living came out. That's my time period for Anthrax.
I get it.
So I'm leaning Anthrax over Avenged Sevenfold. I was just never a goth guy or an emo dude. So I did not go to I mean, I loved going into Hot Topic, but I couldn't stay there for very long. I'd rather have gone to Spencer's.
I get that. Funny enough, I just bought a shirt from Hot Topic the other day, but on their website. Yeah,
Really?
I saw a shirt that I thought was really cool looking. I was like, that's so funny. I haven't been to Hot Topic in I don't know how long. I'm almost 40, so I don't belong there. At least not in the store in the mall. But
When I go to concerts, I look like somebody from Hot Topic, but
yeah, well, all of us do. All right. So, yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on Anthrax. I mean, I think Avenged Sevenfold definitely, has their impact, and I stand by what I said, but before that being said, Anthrax being, a member of the Big Four, a modern, a band in some ways, like, that's not the way, it's not really what I meant to say. What I mean is, like, their modern incarnation um has revitalized them in a lot of ways, and I think they're an even heavier band than they used to be. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, very fair.
um
Very fair.
all right, well, this puts us in the, I guess, not technically the final round, but the
This is the semifinals.
semifinals. All right, so
All right. Well, we have AC/DC versus Accept. Um, you have the worldwide accolades of AC/DC versus the one of the pioneers behind power metal.
it's a tough one. But I think, okay, so when I think of metal between the two bands, I gotta go with Accept in that capacity, because they just exemplify metal more to me. Their songs are more metal. Their pretty much everything in that regard is more metal. AC/DC has the bigger accolades, sure, but is it because they're metal? I don't think so. So, what's your opinion on this?
Early on, if this was 10, 15 years ago, maybe even more, AC/DC's got this hands down. But AC/DC is they are what they are. They are a hard rock band that leans metal. Except, man, ever since they came back, I mean, they've released solid album after solid album after solid album, and that's another thing that I like about them. We talked about Armored Saint and their consistency. Except since they've come back with Blood of the Nations, have just made super consistent with their sound, super consistent with their style, and it is unequivocally, is that the word?
Unequivocally.
Unequivocal,
Unequivocally.
unequivocally, yes, unequivocally, unequivocal, ugh, whatever. It's fucking metal. It's fucking getting late. So yes, it is nothing but metal. So in this particular case, because this is a metal show, we are debating metal. Um, I'm gonna have to sit there and say that Accept takes this one.
I'm with you.
All right. Well, now we have, I think, a tough case here. We have Amon Amarth versus Anthrax.
So, um, I might be crazy, but I think that Amon Amarth has bigger footprint today than Anthrax. Obviously, there's a longer a history with Anthrax, but I think the modern metal fan who is growing up, and I'm not talking about old fogies like us, but younger fans that are getting into it, anywhere from 20, and maybe even younger, up until our ages, I think um, there is just more of a modern appeal to Amon Amarth. Anthrax, love them. They are still an absolutely great band, and the times I've seen them, they're good. But last time we saw them, it's like you couldn't even really hear the quality of the music because they had everything so loud that it was drowned out, and it was like too loud for the speaker system they had in the was it Bayou City was where we saw them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a shame. I haven't seen him on a Marth live, so hopefully I'm breaking that streak very soon, and everything will work out there. But man, I think they're more of the modern metal band, and in some ways, um, that I think that's more important than just having history.
Well, all right. So I can see which way you're leaning, but there's a reason why. Let's look at it like this. When you sit there and you're the king over your land, right?
Mhm.
You're a king until you die or until you abdicate,
Yeah.
and or you're incapacitated to the point where you can't lead anymore. Okay, and I'm not saying that Anthrax are kings, although they did say that on their last
They
album.
were no, they said it was for all kings.
Oh, it's for all
Yeah,
kings, right?
that so
Um,
us being the listeners, we are the kings. That's my interpretation.
so okay, whatever you say. um, so there's a reason why, ultimately, when it all comes down to it, Metallica is in the position that they're in. Um, whether it's influence, record sales, or whatever. And you and I are gonna discuss something that I heard on the in the Gary Holt book that will kind of explain this a little bit more. But we're gonna do that after the show, or do that work, whatever. Um, Anthrax to me, um, you talk about a band that went from almost being on top of their genre. They're considered, one of the big four, to virtually insignificant because they had the worst record deals. They had the worst timing. So the albums, tanked as soon as they came out. To, you know, the Metallica does the whole Big Four tour in Europe, and they do one in the States, and Anthrax is the opening act. Okay, there's Anthrax, Megadeth, Slayer, then Metallica. But the reason why Anthrax was the opening act is one, they're part of the Big Four, but you know, their success is the least of the four.
Yeah.
But yet, the fact that they were there was because I'm pretty sure they're not they're not doing that tour, or Metallica's not bringing them on tour if Joey's their singer, and not Joey, excuse me, if John's their singer. Okay, so it had to be Joey. And I'm not saying that Metallica said, "Oh, by the way, you got to bring back Joey if you want to do this." I don't think that was the case. I think that just happened to be timing. But I think Anthrax knew they couldn't do it unless Joey was in the band. And they at this time they hadn't, they hadn't gotten rid of John, or John hadn't quit, kind of thing. John was out doing his own thing, and then there was, they brought Joey back, and John was back, and it was a weird time period for Anthrax. Anyway, in a nutshell, to sit there and say Anthrax deserves this spot because, just like Metallica, for what they are in the A's, to me, they are the head in that regards because everyone else comes after them.
I Yeah, I get that, but um I think there is a an argument for just because they came first doesn't make them better. Anthrax has had a lot of ups and downs, inconsistencies, like you said, um, bad decisions on their part as well as their management. It's not just their management's fault. I mean, they made some bad choices as well, um,
Oh yeah.
and um, I think you in some ways got to think about the future too. Like, uh, Amon Amarth is bringing about a lot of you know new stuff. They influenced a whole genre of metal. I think Anthrax, in a lot of ways, they did do some influential stuff like the rap metal stuff, and that is valid as well. So you could say the two offset each other, and they do have more accolades for sure. They are part of the big four, but I think they're the least of the big four. If I think Slayer, holds more weight there as well. So, um, Yeah, I think it is a it's a pretty even battlefield, but I'm still leaning towards the Monomarth. So, what do you think?
I mean, if you're talking about battlefield, the Monomarth or Vikings, dude,
That's fair.
they're gonna
Yeah.
take you out.
They're bringing axes.
um, yeah,
Yeah,
they're bringing axes. Where Scott Ian's bringing his guitar axe,
yeah.
uh, or he might borrow Gene Simmons' axe
Oh,
bass.
fair enough. Yeah.
Um, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and it's my leaning towards Anthrax is because you know they they were there. They were there from basically from the beginning, but at the same time, I get what you're saying. They are the least of the big four. They're the smallest of the big four. If you want to look at it that way, so they are still an underling in those in that regards. A Monomorph, I mean, they're metal, that's for sure. And they have definitely changed a lot over the years. I mean, I can see your point. I can see your point. Um, it's tough for me to relinquish that Anthrax is not going to take the spot. But here, I look at it this way: when I went to see Lamb of God, when Anthrax opened for them,
Mhm.
I was personally hurt that Anthrax did not have a bigger crowd.
I can see that.
I got I got to meet them backstage. I got them to sign my jacket and all that stuff. And Anthrax had a good sized crowd. And then all of a sudden it got full for Lamb of God. And I was like, are you serious? Man, this is fucking Anthrax, man. You know? And maybe it's because I never really saw that for itself until that day. So I'm gonna go ahead and bow down on this one for you for Amon Amarth.
Well, um, thank you, and uh, I think it's fair. I mean, we need to show you know as much care for the future of metal as we do the past, right? And sometimes it's hard because the older we get and the amount we're tied to the nostalgia of things, it's sometimes hard to look objectively and see those things. Um, I think again, there's an argument for both. But that being said, if Amon Amarth is continuing on, they're going up against another band that's been around for even longer than Anthrax. So this is I mean, technically, Amon Amarth has been around since the '90s. It's not like they're a brand new band, but they do have that appeal. But so we got more modern versus one of the originators. So let's talk about that.
Amon Amarth versus Accept. Um, so they're both metal, and they're both two different styles of metal: power metal versus Viking metal, melodic death metal slash Viking. Um, and Accept. I mean, yes, they're older. They've been there around, older than Anthrax and all that stuff, and yet at the same time, nowhere near as known as Anthrax, nowhere near as known as Amon Amarth. I look at it this way: let's have a festival in Europe, right? And is eh, which one of these three bands? And I'm going back to Anthrax only because we just came out of them. Which one of these three bands is going to headline? Anthrax, Amon Amarth, or Accept? Right. So we know Amon Amarth is bigger than Anthrax, even though they've got the name, right? Anthrax has always had the name, but they've never had the deep following. So you got Amon Amarth versus Accept. Accept is huge in Europe, but so is Amon Amarth.
Yeah.
Especially the last several years. Um, I think Accept is relatively consistent. There, to me, in a festival setting, Accept is probably middle of the bill, maybe getting towards late afternoon. On one of those stages. But does Amon Amarth play later? Do they play when they have when the lights go on and the sun sets? I'm gonna sit there and say yes. I think Amon Amarth has got a bigger name in Europe, at least.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, that's what I think. I could be wrong. Maybe Accept goes, gets a bigger spot because of quote unquote name recognition.
I hadn't really thought of that. I mean, that is a perspective that I would wonder who has the bigger ticket sales, and I mean, there's a way to look that up. So, who has the bigger ticket sales in Europe? Amon Amarth or Accept? Let's see. Gotta look it up. So, Amon Amarth has bigger ticket sales and overall draw in Europe compared to Accept, based on current touring patterns, venue sizes, and available indicators of popularity and attendance. Um, that's wild. This is citing multiple dates in key markets, 8 in Germany alone. So, even in Germany, has a larger attendance, as well as Wacken Open Air and let's see. So
I'm look
go ahead.
I'm looking at some festivals that are happening this summer, except on one of them doing their 50th anniversary show. But did not see Amon Amarth. But Amon Amarth might be here in the States,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading right now as well. So I mean, that is a really valid point. Like, who do you think would be higher on the festival card? So I'm in agreement with you. Um, I was leaning more towards Accept just based on their history and their you know image, etc. But I mean, you're kind of convincing me, along with the points that I was making as far as why I thought of Monomarth over Anthrax, and I'm kind of leaning more towards Monomarth now.
I mean, I look at it that way. Like I'm looking at Hellfest 2026,
Mm-hmm.
and Anthrax is going to be there, um, but neither Accept nor Amon Amarth are going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But Anthrax is middle of the bill on day 3. Um, but it's just I I I think I agree that I think that I think my assessment of Amon Amarth being a bigger band in Europe, selling more tickets, I think they are definitely at that point.
Yeah, most of these this is citing 15 sources, and it's saying that Monomarth has bigger ticket sales and overall draw in Europe. Europe being probably the biggest market for metal right now. The U.S. is stuck in a loop of garbage music, and man, I hope we get out of it. Um,
Just garbage.
yeah, it's all garbage. It all sounds the same. Um, and the lack of creativity. You have like 6 songwriters writing for all these different people. Pop music sucks so much ass right now. Just it's I feel good going on a rant about this because this shit sucks. like we brought up Grammys and stuff like that, and you know, at certain times they had some level of value, but I don't give two shits what anybody from the Grammys says anymore. Um, and so like you know, we as metal fans, we've never cared about that stuff. Um, you know, it matters only in the respect that it's brought some more eyes to the music that we love, but we know why we love the music. It's not because somebody gives us awards, it's because it's awesome shit. Like all these bands we're talking about, it doesn't matter how many awards they got it, you're still gonna listen to it every day, right? So
Right.
you know, what I care about in a lot of ways is who's bringing more people into the scene. You know, every time we go, we see young fans. Like we saw Cavalera, and we stood next to some kid that was like 16 years old, and he's excited because he's playing in a band and he's inspired by these guys. And it's so cool to see the younger generation getting into the music that we grew up in and that meant so much to us as we were growing up. And Amon Amarth, to me, in a large way, is bringing those fans in. They're older guys just like us, you know, and they've been playing for, you know, 20 years at this point and are now getting more recognition because, you know, you mentioned their name and I think a lot of people know who they are, and it's on the merits of, you know, the Viking aspect of it that became very popular in our culture here in the US because of shows like Vikings and games like God of War and things like that that have really brought some attention to it. The Thor movies, Loki, all that stuff. So, you know, whatever your perception of those things are, they, you know, at least they're bringing some eyes to this stuff. And, um, you know, I've spoken to people that are just absolute normies who know who Amon Amarth is.
Oh wow, that's surprising. But yeah, I mean, to me, Amon Amarth has got to take it. You know, to be the kings of the A's in metal.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm surprised, but I'm happy. I like it.
All right, well, there it is. Amon Amarth comes away with the win on the ABCs of metal on debating metal.
All right. Well, this was the first in the series. And like I said, we're going to do a few different things with it, but we're going to go all the way through A through Z. And hope you had fun with this one because I really enjoyed it. Not all of them are going to be brackets. There's going to be some just straight up debates when they're smaller numbers and stuff like that. So if you have some opinions, if you have a differing opinion on who you think A is, we want to hear about it and write your dissertation, and we will be happy to talk about it on the show next time.
Absolutely. I mean, we're definitely going to intersperse some other episodes in with the ABCs, but hopefully we can get on a roll here this year and knock out this entire ABCs, all 26 letters this year. That's the goal, including other episodes. So we got a lot of episodes planned for this year. If I can not be sick and we can get in a consistent role of going every, at least every 2 weeks, and that'd be great.
Send Kenneth
But
some zinc in the mail, and we'll.
all right. Well, that's our ABCs of metal, the A bracket. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Debating Metal. If you did, or even if you didn't, click like or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you can get our latest download as soon as it drops. And while you're there, leave us a comment and give us some feedback.
And don't forget, you can interact with us on Facebook, Instagram, and on X, or send us an email to debatingmetal@gmail.com. YouTube viewers, click subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when we post a new show. And remember, tune into the next episode where we'll spark up another exciting metal debate. On behalf of Kenneth and myself, stay safe and always turn it up to 11.
See ya. See ya.
What the fuck was that?